and welcome to our series Lead, Care, Adapt. I've got some great guests joining me today, and I hope you'll enjoy. With me I have Katie Sullivan. Katie is the Managing Director of IETA, the global business voice for the intersection of markets and climate change. On behalf of IETA's 150 plus business members, Katie leads efforts to inform climate policy and market design across the Americas and the Asia Pacific. She also manages IETA's growing work on international aviation and financial instruments to scale clean private capital. Thanks for joining us, Katie.
Thank you, Beth.
And I also have joining with me Dr. Niall McDowell. Niall is a reader in energy systems at Imperial College London. He's a chartered engineer, a fellow of both the IChemE and the Royal Society of Chemistry. His research is focused on understanding the transition to a low-carbon economy, and Niall does a lot of work. He's an expert in carbon capture, utilization, and storage.
Thank you, Beth.
We will likely see CO2 emissions fall this year as a result of the impact of the coronavirus on the economy. But this isn't the result of governments and companies adopting new policies and strategies. Katie, are you seeing governments and companies still keeping their eye on climate outlooks?
It's a good question. Thanks very much, Beth. We can't be tone deaf to the unprecedented nature of the pandemic and socioeconomic impacts that we're facing worldwide. And there's still so much uncertainty ahead, including the shape and direction of economic recovery packages and bailouts. And the same can be said for companies, really, that are assessing near and longer term impacts to operations, to investments, to supply chains, and even to climate and ESG commitments. So, triage and delays are happening across both public and private sectors, but I'm not seeing a wholesale, retreats from climate action and commitments. I'd say now, will we see many governments submitting, enhanced climate ambitions or net zero plans in 2020 later this year? Maybe not as many as we thought we would see. But it doesn't mean that countries, don't remain committed to submitting and then executing those plans through 2021 and beyond. And really, as we lead to and through the postponed COP26 climate negotiations in Glasgow next year. As for companies, including the investor community, I'm not really seeing much wavering, okay? In fact, I see some that are doubling down on corporate climate commitments and clean investment plans. And you just really have to look at some recent announcements by Amazon, LG Electronics, Barclays, Shell, and many more, and very recent. And not to mention, there's growing signatories with science-based targets, RE100, again, broader carbon neutrality.
Thanks, Katie. This pandemic has brought to the forefront the need for decisive action. With efforts focused on the current health and economic crisis, the threat posed by climate change remains, and commitments under the Paris Agreement are still in place. So, Niall, can we use the current situation to step up climate ambitions and stimulate clean energy technologies? And do you think CCS can play a role?
So great question, Beth, and it's fantastic that you and the rest of our colleagues at the CCS Knowledge Centre are continuing to provide leadership at this time. In terms of the ambition, fundamentally, I think that there's quite enough ambition to go around. Ever since the climate, the Paris target was agreed on, global CO2 emissions have gone up, not down. So, really, I would say enough ambition, let's see some action. In response to the COVID pandemic, people are flying a lot less, traveling a lot less, and consuming a lot less, right? So this is a pretty profound behavioral change. And as a consequence, all of the indications are that globally anthropogenic CO2 and other greenhouse gas emissions will come down this year. However, it's also understood that this would not be enough to get us to our climate change commitments. And if we wanted to try and do this through behavioral changes alone, it would be, we would have to go much, much further. And I think that will be, to say the least, very, very challenging on a human basis. So I think that there's a really key role for additional technical interventions to meet these goals. in that context, whether it's the IPCC or the IEA, the UK's Committee on Climate Change, and a plethora of academic work, all of this sort of comes together to tell us that, yeah, CCS will play a vitally important role to meeting these targets. So yeah, absolutely. Often combating climate change is framed in terms of costs. It's going to cost us a lot of money. We'll have to change this, sacrifice that, and so on. I think that it's time, we really need to reframe that discussion through this green growth lens that we talk about. I really believe that if we're astute about how we drive this transition, it's entirely possible that we can continue to preserve the affordable provision of energy and industrial services whilst preserving jobs and creating new jobs at all levels of the economy.
So you both talked about net zero, and that's obviously something that's required to tackle this other global crisis that we're facing, climate change, which is still going to be there when we're allowed to leave our homes. Companies like BP and Shell have publicly committed to net zero ambitions right now. And Katie, you mentioned Shell in your previous comment. What does net zero mean?
Net zero. So, first of all, let's look to IPCC, right, and the climate science, and how Paris commits us to net zero emissions globally, right, in the second half of the century. So this means, we have to keep the rise of global mean temperatures to well below that 2 degrees Celsius, above pre-industrial levels, and that we try to limit global warming to the 1.5 degrees Celsius. So net zero really, it means achieving an overall balance in these emissions produced and emissions taken out of the atmosphere. And here's where you want the balance is critical. That's an important word, right, to underscore. So, unlike gross zero targets, which would reduce emissions from all sources to zero, net zero is really what we're talking about, when it comes to being realistic, where the net allows for residual emissions. And so it's the net that really allows for these more realistic, affordable transitions to see us through the journey, right, to where we need to go. And this is where biosequestration, so forestry and agriculture, land use management, geosequestration, CCUS, this is where it comes into play in a very, very big way. And it's certainly where my organization, IETA, focuses a lot of our time and attention. And, I'll just say that reaching net zero gross negative emissions, it means matching the gross positive emissions. And really any credible climate scenario going forward, we aren't talking even net zero, we're talking net negative, where is, come mid-century.
Great answer. Thanks so much, Katie, for explaining that for us. Niall, as a carbon capture and storage expert, can you explain to us why CCS fits into the concept of net zero?
First of all, it's this precision around the term net zero. Contrary to, I think, quite a lot of rhetoric, net zero does not equate to zero fossil. It's, as Katie was saying, it's a balanced portfolio approach that allows us to, conserve value. And so in that context, the UK has been very proactive in terms of climate policy for really quite some time. Back in 2008, we had the Climate Change Act that committed us to an economy-wide 80% reduction of all greenhouse gases by 2050. And then around the middle of last year, this ambition, that word again, was scaled up to net zero across the entire economy. And, that net zero piece, it does have a useful clarity around it, because when the ambition is less than net zero, many sectors sort of think that they can hide in that, that residual portion. In order to achieve net zero, this really does require the deployment and the rapid deployment of a, wide variety of approaches. And again, there isn't a sort of a tension between let's do CCS and not, say, renewable energy, or let's do greenhouse gas removal and not direct mitigation. This really is a scenario of and it's everything all at once as quickly as possible. In order to deploy these technologies at scale, we need concepts that are available today. And that is one place where CCS technology has a really important role to play. As you guys have shown in Saskatchewan, this is a technology that can be deployed, built, operated successfully without any kind of need to reinvent the wheel. So in that context, I think, it's pretty obvious to me that CCS has a key and enduring role to play in decarbonizing both the power and the industrial sectors. And then the negative emissions options like BECCS will be really important for dealing with some of the residual emissions from those industries.
So I want to offer you both the opportunity to talk about what you guys have been doing, during this pandemic with your organizations, as well as some opportunities to speak about what's been postponed potentially. And I know, Niall, we had a great CCS conference that we were planning together. Do you want to maybe talk about that and anything else you want to bring up?
As you've mentioned, we've been running this meeting, the CCS Forum, every couple of years since 2016, and we were hoping to run it again this summer in Italy, but unfortunately that's unlikely to happen. So we're trying to keep the ball rolling, and the aim this time is to really be thinking about ways in which markets can be created for CCS technologies around the world, and also the ways in which business models can be developed that would actually work. So that those conversations are still going on, and we're hoping to have the meeting again likely next year at this point.
And Katie, turning it over to you, how about you with IETA?
I'd say the biggest thing has been really, we have played such a big role over the years and continue to around in-person type events, right? So like the CCS Forum, with IETA, we partner with quite big events all over the world that bring together business and multilateral development banks, UNFCCC, governments, to discuss the latest state of play and outlooks and opportunities for climate finance, to policy, to technology. And it's everywhere. Africa Climate Week, Latin America Climate Week, European Climate Week, all postponed or canceled, right? It's unfortunate, but we're, I think, adjusting to the reality, and we are trying to execute as many things as we can through virtual type events and panels, at least to see us through, 2020, or when we turn a corner towards, when we turn a corner. And I guess the most, near-term announcement would be we've agreed with the World Bank, our major partner, Innovate for Climate. That is a big event every year. It was supposed to take place in Barcelona at the end of May. We will be moving forward with virtual type panels and events, and right now there is a call out for interest in what some of those key topics might be.
Wonderful, thanks. Well, we're going to share the highlights of this video on our website and have links to your events there as well. So if you could please share with your stakeholders, we want to get the word out. Thanks so much for joining me today.
Thank you, Beth.